we have 3 presenters tonight instead of 4. And our 4th presenter, which was Miss Sharon Phillips, we ask that you keep her in prayer because she is actually in the hospital. So please keep her in prayer. But our first presenter, and we'll go in this order, our first presenter will be Robert Petty, and he is State Farm Insurance. He's an agent for State Farm Insurance. Our second presenter will be Mr. Ulysses Miller, and he is the owner of Ulysses Miller Funeral Home. And our third and final presenter will be Reverend Terry P. Young, who is the pastor of St. Paul AME Zion Church and an attorney. Okay, let me go Facebook Live. Y'all give me a couple of seconds while I figure this out because sometimes I have trouble multitasking. Pastor, do you wanna say a few words while I'm trying to do this?
No, I'll hold my words to the end.
Okay. Sorry for this inconvenience, but it's just kind of hard for me to type and do this at the same time. But I pray that God's spirit will come into this session and that we will learn and grow and share.
Excuse me.
Okay. Okay. Apparently we're gonna have a problem. We're just gonna have to go Facebook Live after on the recording end of it. But our first our first presenter is Robert Petty, and he is Robert Petty is a native of Mill Springs, North Carolina. He is a 1980 graduate of the University of North Carolina. He is married and he has 3 children. He has been in the financial services for 37 years and he is an agent for State Farm Insurance and he has been that for 35 years. Robert is a godly man and one who doesn't mind sharing the word of God when you call him up about an insurance matter. A person, Robert is a person that you can trust for your insurance needs. And he has been my insurance agent for almost as long as my son has been born because we actually contacted Robert and wanted to take out insurance when our son was born, and Robert wouldn't let us. He said we had to wait till he was 6 months old. So, without further ado, Robert Petty with State Farm Insurance, and he will be discussing with us insurance matters. And if you would hold your questions to at the end when Robert finishes his presentations, and then we can ask him some questions. Robert Petty.
Well, good evening to everyone on the call and on video and on the phone. First of all, I want to thank you, Dale, for the invitation to, as you stated, to share and to grow and to learn. I look forward to the other presenters and hopefully I can learn something from them as well. Thank you, St. Paul AME Zion Church, for inviting me. Pastor Young, thank you for allowing me to be here. Dale, that was almost the best introduction I've ever had. I don't think I could have, other than me introducing myself, I think that was the best one I've ever had.
Well, bless you. Bless you.
With one little correction, which is going to date me a little bit more, I actually finished Carolina in 76. So you're trying to make me
Oh,
4 years younger, and I do appreciate that as well.
okay. I'm
Uh,
sorry.
that's all right. Dale asked me to speak on insurance tonight, and I guess I sort of narrowed it down. Maybe there was maybe this was my fault, but I sort of narrowed it down really to life insurance. Based on today's times and what have you. We can talk about any type of insurance that you want, but my topic really is sort of specific to life insurance this evening, and we're really just going to sort of hit the top of the hills. We're not going to get into too much depth, but we're going to start off. Why do you need life insurance? And I guess I'm not a scholar of the Bible, but I think somewhere in the Bible it says a person or a man is to leave an inheritance for his children's children. And one of the ways that we can do that in our communities or in any community is with life insurance. So why do we need life insurance? We need life insurance based on that inheritance or that need for people that we love. And sometimes we need life insurance really for people that we maybe owe. And, who do we love, and why do we need to leave money, maybe possibly in the form of life insurance, to people that we love? And that could be for the replacement of income. If a person dies and it's a 2-income family, that remaining spouse may need that income to continue the lifestyle in which they have become accustomed to living. Life insurance also can be left if it's a 2-income family, to educate your children, leave a fund to send them to college or trade school or junior college or community college, or to help them start a business. You might need life insurance to leave an inheritance, as I stated in my earlier quote. You also can use life insurance to leave, from a charitable standpoint, you can leave it to your church or to an organization or to a nonprofit in which you love. Excuse me. So there are numerous reasons to leave life insurance for people if you love them. There's also reasons to leave life insurance if you owe people. Many people own their homes, and some of those people actually have mortgages on those homes or loans on those homes. And if one dies prematurely before that loan is paid off, it might be the consideration should be given to life insurance to pay the remainder of that mortgage off in the event that the person who's working and paying that mortgage dies prematurely. But that also can be applicable, unfortunately, to rent. If a husband and wife are living in a rental house or an apartment or what have you, and one of those people die, is that person who's remaining, are they going to still be able to maintain the rent and live that lifestyle, even in a rental situation? Many of us have auto loans. Life insurance can pay off that car. When I finished Carolina, I had student loans. So consequently, those loans can be paid off. If you have children, you may want to leave money for your children to go to school if you die prematurely. Mr. Miller will talk about the funeral expenses of funerals if someone dies. So you want to have life insurance or the money to leave behind for funeral expenses and final expenses. In today's society, a young man and a young woman join in matrimony. Now the responsibility from a financial standpoint somewhat increases, really for both of them as they provide or form a new household. So maybe the husband needs to buy life insurance on the wife needs to buy life insurance on the husband, so that that household can grow and prosper in our American system. So it really comes down to, who do you love and who do you owe and who do you want to protect? Who do you want to leave an inheritance to? What financial obligations do you have? What financial risk do you have? I'll take that another step. It also can be used in a situation where maybe in my case and possibly in the pastor's case, where you go out and start a business, you open a business, whether it's a law firm, an insurance agency, and you go in debt to open that business. And if you are married, generally, the spouse might be also responsible for that debt. So you want to have a life insurance policy to cover that debt in the event that you die prematurely. And with life insurance, the situation can be a short-term problem, or it can be a long-term problem. A short-term problem might be I go out and I get a loan on a car, and that loan is for 5 years. That might be considered a little bit short-term. Now cars are fairly expensive. They can be anywhere from $25,000 to $50,000 for an average car. I think I looked at a Ford F-150, and I'm looking at a pickup truck, and a pickup truck, $55,000. All right. So, now I go out, if I got a loan on that vehicle, you might want to consider having a life insurance policy to pay off that vehicle in the event that I die prematurely.
Right.
A long-term problem for life insurance could be, once again, a newborn. You want to set aside, of course, money for their education, but what if you don't live long enough to set aside those funds for that education? So if I die prematurely, maybe I want my son or daughter to go to college. So you might have a life insurance policy set aside to do that. Most home loans are 20 to 30 years. So you might want to protect that home loan with a longer term type life insurance policy to make sure that if you die prematurely, that the remaining spouse does not have to leave that home unless they choose to, but not have to leave because of financial stress.
Yes.
And over time, over the course of a person's lifetime, certainly those needs and those risks change. As we get older, depending on if a spouse has a good retirement program, how much money they might be getting in Social Security, there might even be a need after we stop working to leave money for a remaining spouse. We may have a disabled child that we need to make sure they're taken care of in the event that we die. Sometimes with our careers, you go from job to job to job. Many employers do offer group life insurance, but sometimes if you change jobs, that life insurance does not go with you, and your group benefits may not kick in for 60 days or 90 days or 180 days. So you need something to cover that 60, 90, 180 days in the event that, once again, you die prematurely. I have an example that I will give you, and it's really sort of a personal example. I have a neighbor who died about a year ago.
Mm.
His wife had worked very little over her life. Most of the income coming into the family was his Social Security and his retirement. Well, once he died, his retirement was not set up that she could keep that retirement. So now she is down really to his Social Security.
Wow.
Her house went up for sale 2 weeks ago, which is my neighbor, because and I have them insured, so I have a relationship with them in a way that, basically she's saying I can't afford the house anymore. and the house is paid for, but I can't afford to live here anymore because of the taxes, because of the insurance, because of the maintenance, because of the painting, et cetera, et cetera. So even if you're in retirement, there might be a need for additional life insurance or additional funds if someone dies prematurely. And I'm going to repeat this again. The Bible says a good man will leave an inheritance for his children's children. So as a grandfather, one of the ways that you can, or a grandmother, one of the ways that you can leave that inheritance to your children's children is through life insurance. And I think Pastor Young will address that maybe in his presentation, but you can do that in the form of life insurance that goes into a trust for the purpose of either children or grandchildren, or possibly even great-grandchildren. So there's a lot of reasons that we need to consider life insurance. And basically, at the end of the day, there are two types of life insurance. There's a permanent type of life insurance that you buy and you lock in the premium and you lock in what is called the face amount, or the amount of life insurance. And that premium and that face amount generally stays the same for your life. And that's called a permanent life insurance. It does build cash value. And as I stated, the face amount and the premium stay level. So when you talk about life insurance, if you want to sort of flip it around, you can also look at the cash value and say this is the life part of the life insurance. Because I will say that in my case, all of my kids have a college degree, and some of that money for their college degree came out of the cash value of our life insurance policies. So it can be used not only for dying, but it can be used for living as well. The second type of life insurance is what's really called a term policy, and it's almost what it sounds like. It is written for a specific amount of time or term. And, I think I referenced earlier, maybe an auto loan of 6 or 7 years and $50,000, $60,000 trucks. Well, you might want to consider a term policy, a 5-year term policy, to pay off that car loan in the event that you die prematurely and your family doesn't lose the down payment that you made, all the payments that you've made, and that vehicle is not repossessed. You also can get a longer length term, possibly for a mortgage. You can buy a 20, 30-year term. And one of the reasons that you would want to buy a term or a time policy is because it tends to be a little bit less expensive. It does not build cash value. Most of them do not build cash value, but they are substantially less expensive. And, since we got a sort of a small group here, and being a little bit intimate, I have a little bit of both. I have a little bit of term. I have a little bit of permanent life insurance. And then there's maybe one that we might hear that's called a universal life, which is sort of a hybrid. I won't go into a whole lot of detail there, but it's somewhere between the term and the whole life. All right. So why do we buy it? What types are available? Okay. So let's talk a little bit about how much life insurance we need. And that's an individual question. I can't answer that. Many of the financial experts out there say that you need 5 or 6 times your income. And, as a young man, when we got married, I can tell you that we could not afford that.
Exactly.
And most of the, hey, I'm being real, we couldn't afford 5 or 6 times my income. And I can assure you my income was pretty low.
No, right.
And I still couldn't afford it.
Mm-mm.
So, we did buy a lot of term insurance initially. And over time, we have converted some of that term insurance into permanent insurance. And some of it, quite frankly, I still have, simply because, I want to keep it at this stage of my life. So, but what I would say in regards to how much do you need, some is better than none. And once you And if you can budget for all you can budget for, and that can be bought in the form of term if you're younger. And generally, it is probably better to buy permanent insurance if you're older.
Robert, I have a question. What is a final expense insurance?
Well, generally, final expense is considered final expense is almost simultaneous or similar to using the term burial insurance.
Okay.
And we have a final expense policy, as does most life insurance companies and most companies that sell life insurance. Ours is a $10,000 policy. And, I'm sure you will hear from one of the other speakers this evening as to what the average cost of a funeral is and whether that would be sufficient or not. That is generally offered to folks who are probably at least 50 years old. And we do sell a lot of final expense policies.
Okay, Robert, will you touch on beneficiaries and why and reviewing those type of those type of documents and how often that should be done?
Well, I think with life insurance, those policies probably need to be reviewed periodically. As life changes, you have, and I'm going to sort of start from the beginning. There's husband and wife, and then there's possibly a child, and then there's possibly another child, and then there's possibly a different home with a mortgage, and then there's possibly a car payment. So life insurance needs to be reviewed and adjusted as you can periodically. I think it probably needs to be looked at, every 3 to 5 years minimum. And in regards to beneficiaries, beneficiaries is who are you going to leave the money to?
Right.
Who do you love, and who are you going to leave your money to? And generally, I recommend you have a beneficiary, but you also add what is called a secondary or successor beneficiary. And a hypothetical could be, my wife and I have a son that lives in Phoenix, Arizona, and we go out there periodically. So, what happens if the plane goes down and my wife is the beneficiary?
Right.
All right. So now, the beneficiary is deceased just like I am. So
Exactly.
we need a successor beneficiary in the event that either we die simultaneously or possibly something happens to one of the spouses beforehand. So it never hurts to have more than one beneficiary, or what is called a successor beneficiary. And then you can have a successor to the successor, which is not a bad idea either. And sometimes hypothetically, if I have my wife down as successor and something happens to her, then you need to, of course, go to your insurance agent and change the beneficiary. And possibly at that time, you're going to change the successor beneficiary.
Okay.
So beneficiaries are really important. Don't just do it and forget it. We actually try to reach out to people every 3 to 5 years, especially in life insurance, and say, has anything changed? Is the beneficiary the same? Should it be the same? Have you had a change of heart? Is there more children? Do you want to leave something to your grandchildren? So all of these questions are important, but really at the end of the day, it is better for the owner of the policy or the insured to reach out to that insurance agency and say, hey, remind me again who I've got down as beneficiary. Remind me again who I've got down as successor, so that if something has changed, those changes can be made before, legal battles and all that craziness starts.
Right. One last question, Robert, and then I'll open up the floor to anybody else on the line that wants to ask a question.
That's right. My 5 minutes up.
Exactly. Ownership of policies. What's the difference between the ownership of who the owner of a policy is and the beneficiary? Are they one and the same?
They are not They are not. I repeat, they are not one and the same. The owner of the policy sort of controls the policy. Generally, if the policy is written on an adult and a mature adult, the insured and the owner may be the same person. However, if I write a policy on my 2-year-old grandchild, the insured is the grandchild and I am the owner. However, I can write a policy on my 35-year-old child and still be the owner, but the child is the insured. All right. Now, I write that policy on my 35-year-old son, hypothetically. I might be the owner, but I actually might say, I want the trust for his son to be the beneficiary. I don't have to be the beneficiary. I can make the beneficiary a trust. So ownership and beneficiaries are totally different and absolutely need to be addressed.
Okay. All right.
Did that answer your question?
It did. It did. Now, is
Okay.
there anybody that would like to ask Robert any questions before we move to our second presenter?
I will entertain questions on any other type of any other type of insurance, but my presentation tonight was specifically, I wanted to be about life insurance. Any questions at all?
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Robert Petty, the agent for State Farm Insurance, and my friend. Thank you for coming on the Zoom line and sharing with us about life insurance. Next, we have Mr.
Dale,
Sir.
before you go, I'm going to get off the camera.
Okay.
I thought I had my phone charged up. Now it's blinking. So I'm going to go get my charger, but I will be back.
Okay. All right. Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you. Next, we have Mr. Ulysses Miller, and he is the owner of Ulysses D. Miller Funeral Services. He is a native of Polk County. Mr. Ulysses grew up in Polk County and then he left. He left and went to the New York City and he was there for over 50 years. And then after several different jobs, different businesses that he did in New York, he came back home. He came back home to Rutherford County and he opened up a funeral home. And it's been a tremendous asset to the county, to the community, because before we had basically Thompson's funeral home and we had Pruitt funeral home as far as black funeral homes, but Mr. Ulysses Miller has come into the area and he's made a huge impact. I know Mr. Ulysses is a godly man as well, and he is married and he has children. Now, without further ado, we have Mr. Ulysses Miller of Ulysses Miller Funeral Services. Good evening, Mr. Miller.
Good evening, everyone. I
Good
want to say
evening.
thank you to the host and also to the participants for inviting me to be a part of our discussion today, which is very, very important. Mr. Petty said a lot of things that many of us need to know, to think about, to share with others. I'm going to be specific and in a sense be brief because I'm going to get right to the point. Many times we ask, why think about funerals? Well, we think about funeral because nobody get out of the world alive.
Exactly.
Another question that may come up, why worry about a funeral for someone who's in perfect health? Well, we've known people who have been in perfect health have a stroke, heart attack, car accident, take us out of here. So it's always good to think about these things in advance and make preparation so that if something of this nature happens, we don't leave back on those that are left behind. They're already grieving about losing a loved one, but now they have to worry about How are we going to take care of the burial expense? How are we going to take care of the bills that left behind? And all those kinds of things. So it's good to think about that before something like that happens. And then we can ask ourselves, well, what are the availabilities? There are many. But one that I'm going to talk about is pre-need. What is pre-need? Pre-need is when you sit down with your funeral director of choice and talk about planning your own funeral. You can do that by deciding what type of funeral you would like to have, how much you want to spend on the funeral. And one of the things is that when you decide on what the cost and how you want to make payments, one of the things with pre-need, once you sit down with the funeral director and make out the plans of your funeral and decide on what it's going to cost, then you can decide on how am I going to pay for it. One of the things with pre-arrangement, there's no set amount that you pay on an installment. It doesn't matter how long it may take. But some people like to get it quickly by paying it all at one time. And some decide that they're going to make installments, and there's no set amount how much you would make anytime you make a payment. Many times, a lot of the people that I sit down with, they start off at $50. And then they decide that they're going to start off paying $50 a month. And as time goes on, they will increase that in order to get to the amount that they decided on that the costs were going to be. One of the things in funeral service, you find that so many people, once they lose a loved one, they're not prepared. They have to borrow a bag, have chicken fries, barbecues, and GoFundMe. And sometimes that's very embarrassing to think that you have not prepared yourself for that final expense. Most funerals today cost from $6,000 to $10,000. It's a lot of money if you don't have it. And if you don't have it, funeral homes are not going to set up any kind of payment plan for you. And one of the reasons for that, because most funeral homes have gotten stuck with bills. Family would come in, sit with you, look sad, cry, beg, and all of that. And I know with me, I have given in a few times and have gotten not one penny after the service.
Jesus.
Next time there's death in the family, they select another funeral home.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that the funeral homes in many areas have decided, if you don't pay me, you're not going to pay another funeral home. So some funeral home will, or some funeral homes, they'll sit down and talk among themselves about who didn't pay. So if you didn't pay me, you decide that you're going to go to another funeral home, they already know about you.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to turn your way also. So there's so much that you can do, and it's so easy for you to do it. And one of the things that if you do take out a pre-need and you decide at some point, say down the line, maybe years later, that you want to change your pre-need to another funeral home. So say, for instance, a new funeral home coming into town, and you decide that you want to transfer over to that particular funeral home. That can be done.
Wow.
It's not engraved in stone that you can't transfer from one funeral home to another. For instance, my sister passed away in August. She had made pre-arrangement with me. about a year ago, she moved to New Jersey. So the family in New Jersey decided that they were not going to bring the body back to North Carolina, that they were going to have the service up there. So what the funeral home up there did, got in touch with me here, and I had the money transferred from the bank here in the county to the funeral home in New Jersey. So you can move your pre-needs around from funeral home to funeral home, from state to state. That can be done without any problem. Just a matter of the funeral homes talking to each other, and the money can be transferred. So think about your funeral home of choice. Give them a call, set up an appointment, sit down with them, because they have what you call general price list with all the things that you would need for a service. It gives you a chance to pick out your casket, your vault, and all those things will mean you have some input in your burial, which most times, if you don't make some sort of prearrangement, you won't have that opportunity. Because a lot of times people, as you know, you have choice of colors, color of clothing you want to wear, color of your casket, and those kinds of where you want to be buried. So it's good when you can pick apart and your final days here on earth. Any questions?
Yes, my Mr. Miller, you told us what the average cost of a funeral was like 6,000, ranging from 6,000 to $10,000. Okay,
Correct.
in the environment that we're in now with the COVID, are they still allowing the traditional funerals, or is it going to cremation, or what is, how are they handling, how are the homes handling that now?
Right. In the last, I would say the last 6 funerals that I had was COVID. What I did was 2, I picked the body up and we went straight to the cemetery and had a graveside service. We did everything that you would do in a traditional service. If you was in the church, you still had the type of service that you would have in the church at the graveside. The only thing, the casket was closed. You didn't open the casket. Also, I have embalmed a COVID-19 body. And I have had a service in the church. I've had a service in the funeral home. But we limit the number of people in the funeral home. But most churches, many of the churches today, don't allow you to bring the COVID-19 bodies into the church. So what some churches have done also, they've had service on the outside.
Okay.
The family would go, if they viewed the body, it was viewed in the funeral home, not in the church.
Okay. So you do not have to have a cremation just because
No,
the person
no,
passed
you
from
don't.
COVID.
Right.
Okay.
I've
Okay.
done funerals in the funeral homes that had the COVID, and I've done cremation, and I've done gravesides.
Okay. Okay. Are there any
If-
questions?
Mr.
Commissioner?
Miller, this is Robert Petty.
Uh-huh.
Of the services in which you're having, COVID or otherwise, in today's challenging time, how many services are you doing that maybe people are opting for cremation who would prefer a traditional funeral, but are opting for cremation simply from a financial standpoint?
I would say almost 50%.
Mm-hmm.
So basically you're saying half of the people, half of the families of deceased loved ones come to you who would like to have a traditional funeral, can't have a traditional funeral simply because of money.
Large portion,
Mm.
especially the younger people. Many of the older ones, they have some type of insurance or some means of paying. It's the younger ones that you always have challenges with not being able to pay, but insist on having a traditional type service and have no means of paying. They end up on GoFundMe, and people today are kind of getting tired of that because it's happening so often.
Mm-hmm.
So you end up getting maybe $200 or $300, but that won't do it. That won't even do a cremation.
Mm-mm.
Because the average cremation runs, say, for about $1,500 and above, depending on the funeral home.
Now, and that 1,500 is only for the cremation. That
Only
doesn't include any of your services, right?
Not at all. None at all.
Wow. So we can see how this ties in life insurance and doing that final farewell. I mean, if you have the life insurance, then that makes it affordable for you to be able to put somebody away the way you want to put them away.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
So we do need to make preparations now while we're making money and even if it's on a budget plan, like you say, you can put a little bit aside each month, on a payment plan, and then you'll have that thing taken care of, and that's not going to be a worry or a concern or an embarrassment when that time comes, because it's going to come for all of us. We just don't know when.
Oh, yeah. Because I know a lot of times I go above and beyond to help someone. When I go home at night and I think about it, and sometimes I might say, I wish I hadn't done it. But at the end of the day, I know that God is going to bless me. I've been in business here in the county for soon will be 11 years, and I remember the first year it was a little slow because most people didn't know me. I've been away too long, and I think they felt that I was not a part of the struggle. But as time went on and they got to know me and know my work, got to know, I guess, to know my heart, because I do feel that I was sent to do what I do. When I was in New York, I was very pleased, happy, thought that I would be there the rest of my life, but it didn't turn out like that. So I'm here to provide a service. I mean, I need money just like everybody else because I pay my bills and all of that, just like everybody else, but I do try to help out in a way that I can to those that are going through. But it's disheartening when they take advantage sometimes of your kindness. I mean, I go in my pocket many times to help folks out when they're struggling, and I know that they want to have a traditional type service. So I give them a discount or make recommendations on items that they can do without. Because I know we as a people, we like to go out in style. You have to be able to afford that. can't afford to go out in style, you have to go out the best way you can.
Yes.
Okay, I have a question.
Yes,
Yes.
Miss Hill.
You're talking about cremations. Uh, does that body have to be embalmed also?
No, you don't
Oh.
embalm a cremation body. Now, sometimes you may want to have a memorial or have a service before cremation. Then you would have to embalm that body. But if you're going to have a direct cremation and have a memorial afterwards, you don't have to cremate the body.
You don't have to embalm it.
That's what I meant. That's what I meant to say. Embalm the body.
Okay.
Mhm.
Are there any more questions for Mr. Miller? Mr. Miller, we thank you for coming on for our Zoom tonight. We thank you, Robert Petty for State Farm Insurance, Mr. Ulysses. And Mr. Ulysses, I thank you because you did both my mom and my dad, and I thank you for your services, and our family was very pleased with the services that you and your staff provided.
Now, thank you for allowing me to serve you. I don't take it lightly. When I get a phone call, right away I began to pray for the family because I know what they are going through, and I'll do all that I can to help them get through it.
Yes, sir. You do. And I know that firsthand. You do. Our third and final presenter is the one and the one and only, our very own, the pastor of St. Paul AME Zion Church, Reverend Terry P. Young, and he is also an attorney. Reverend Young is a man of God. He is the pastor, and Miss Linda Hill, who's on the Zoom line, is her brother. And so, you know, she logs into our Zoom church on Sunday mornings. And so, Reverend Young will be talking to us about, he is married and he does have children. I don't know exactly how long Reverend Young's been an attorney, but I think for a very long time. He may share that with us. And he'll talk to us about asset protection, maybe touch on some wills, power of attorneys, stuff that we need to do as far as making preparations, because some of these things, if we don't get in place before a person is so sick that they can't make their own decisions, then it ends up into a lot of legal issues. It's hard. It's challenging to be able to get the authority or the authorization to do, make decisions for that person when they can't make them for themselves if you don't have certain documents in place. So without further ado, the next and our final presenter will be that of Reverend Terry P. Young.
Thank you, Reverend Simmons. Good evening to each of you tonight, and good evening to anyone who may look at this later on. It's good to be with you. And I thank Reverend Simmons for asking me to do this. Let me get into this. I'm going to add a little bit to what Dale mentioned, because I think it's also important in the whole scheme of things. As I was listening to both Mr. Petty and Mr. Miller, I began to think about getting your first job. And we're talking about making preparations. And in the society that we live today, it is different for folks in their first job than it was for those of us who are on the Zoom line. Probably when you had your first job, your first paycheck was actually a check that you had to take to a financial institution to get cash, or a check to take to a financial institution to put in the bank. Today, at virtually all employers, they do not give an actual paycheck. You have to have a bank account, and those funds are directly deposited into that bank account. Now, what normally happens today is that those folks who get their first job tend to go to a bank that they have seen on the television. They tend to go to a Wells Fargo. They tend to go to a Bank of America. They tend to go to one of those big banks. And since we're talking about asset protections, we're basically talking about folk who are no more than middle income. And normally in your first job, you're probably not in middle income. And so the first mistake that folks tend to make is that they go to one of the big banks who's going to charge them a considerable amount of money to manage their usually not a lot of funds. And the best place for those folk to go would be to a local credit union. Now, I understand that everybody is not eligible to go to some of the bigger credit unions like the State Employees Credit Union, but in every community, there are local credit unions which will allow folk to come to them and open up accounts. And usually in those credit unions, the accounts give folks things like free checking and things of that nature. Now, the other thing about the financial institutions, it always depends upon the person who is the banker. You have some good bankers and you have some just okay bankers, just like you have some good insurance agents like Mr. Petty, and you have some good morticians like Mr. Miller, because there are, insurance agents who will just try and sell you something, and there are morticians who will, get you, in there in your time of need and get you to spend a whole lot of money. But we know that Mr. Miller is not one of those, and we know Mr. Petty is not one of those. Now, the thing, and I say that because oftentimes bankers don't necessarily tell folk what they need to know when they open an account. For example, and this will be important later on in life, because oftentimes folk will open up an account and never change anything about their account. Where it becomes important, maybe later on in life, for example, you can have a bank account, and if that person passes, it becomes important as to whether or not that person has designated a person on the account to be a right of survivor type of account. Now, if a right of survivor type of account, then the person who is designated as that person can then go in, get the money out of the account and use that money oftentimes for funeral services for that person. However, if it has not been designated as a right of survivors account, then that account then must go through what we call probate.
Probate. Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes, there are people who really don't have a lot of money and probate is unnecessary, but now they've got to go through probate just to get some money in an account. It might only be $500, and then you got to go through probate, and the probate fees are gonna, suck up some of that money. That was just a little tidbit that I wanted to throw in there as we move along. Now, as we move along in life, there are things that we need to get in place, and there are unfortunately too many homes where people have not put those things in place. There are documents that I tell people that they need to have. Folks need to have a power of attorney. Folks need to have either a living will or a healthcare power of attorney, and folks need to have a will. Now, they're not going to talk about the different types of power, but when a person goes to get a power of attorney, they can talk to their attorney about a power of attorney. But the reason that everyone needs a power of attorney, regardless of your age, there can be situations in your life where you can be incapacitated. You can be incapacitated because you injured your knee and you're in the hospital, or you're incapacitated and you're out of the hospital, but you're at home and you can't get around. For example, our friend who is in the hospital now, Sister Sharon Phillips, she is in her 40s, and she is in a position where she is not able to get to her bank. She is in a position where she is not able to get to places where things need to be done. But if she has a power of attorney, that person who is her her agent can do the things for her as if she was there doing them herself. And so it's always, the problem is that people don't know that they need a power of attorney until the situation comes upon them, and then they wish they had a power of attorney. So I always tell folks, it's something that you ought to do before you actually need a power of attorney. And then I want to talk about health attorney and living wills. But before I talk about them, I want to talk about one of the things that none of us ever anticipate is having to go into a nursing home. But unfortunately, probably 1 out of 10 has to go into a nursing home. And we don't know whether or not we're going to be that one. I was looking at some statistics, and it says the average nursing home cost for a semi-private room is about $25 a day. For nursing home care for a private room is $253. And the average cost for assisted living is $119 a day. So when you look at that, the semi-private room in a nursing home is almost $7,000, $6,844. The average cost in a private room in a nursing home is $7,698. And the average cost for assisted living is $3,628. And so one of the things that we can do, Mr. Petty didn't talk about this, but I'm sure that he probably also sells pre-need, or what you call long-term care insurance. We can buy long-term care insurance, and I would imagine that if we buy long-term care insurance, that long-term care insurance would be much cheaper if we bought it much earlier in life. Would that be true, Mr. Petty?
Pastor Young, that is absolutely true.
And so, although in my 40s, I'm not thinking about having to go into a nursing home, but probably in my 40s is the time that I need to be looking at buying long-term care insurance to be prepared if I in fact have to go into a nursing home. Now, what people tend to think is that, well, if I have to go into a nursing home, I will allow, I'm thinking, so a lot of folks say, well, Medicare will pay for it. Medicare does not pay for nursing care. What Medicare will do, let's say a person goes to the hospital, and then at the hospital in preparing to discharge the person, they oftentimes discharge them to a skilled nursing facility or rehab. Medicare will pay up to 20 days. But after 20 days, you don't get any more Medicare. Now, sometimes folks find themselves in a situation where after 20 days, they still need to remain in that skilled nursing facility. Then there are times when the doctor said, well, your loved one can no longer stay at home. It's time for them to go to a skilled nursing facility. Medicare will not pay for that. Now, if you have not purchased a long-term care insurance policy, the question becomes, how are you going to pay for that? then the next question becomes Medicaid. Now, the problem for Medicaid, understand Medicaid is a financial-based program. You have to qualify for Medicaid. Now, I'm trying to look at some, let me look at something. I think let me find it right quick. Now, Medicaid's eligibility requirements vary depending on age, marital status, and where you live, the state of your residency. But as a whole, you cannot get Medicaid if you have an income greater than $2,313 per month. Now, even so, now the problem for most folk, and this one we talk about asset protections. For the majority of our people, their assets tend to be their house, assets tend to be maybe their vehicles, and they may have some other assets. Now, let's assume that you've got a house that's worth, say, $200,000. Now, of course, if there are two spouses and one spouse is going to remain in the home, Medicaid will not count that house against you. However, if you're, let's say you're unmarried or you're widowed, Medicaid looks at that house before you're eligible for Medicaid. Now, what some folks tend to do is that they think that, well, looks like I might have to go into a nursing home. Well, let me start giving this stuff away to my kids. Let me deed my house away to my son, or deed my house away to my daughter. Let me give away this money that I have in the bank to one of my children, and then I can qualify for Medicaid. Or let me, just turn it over to them and let them hold it on my behalf, and I will qualify for Medicaid. That's not the case. Medicaid has what we call a 60-month look back period. It means is that if you had a house and you deeded that house away within that 60-month period, Medicaid is going to look at that and disqualify you. There's a formula that they use and disqualify you based on the value of the asset that you gave away, deeded away, or gave away for less than fair market value. They're going to look at that asset, and then based on the value of that asset, they're going to disqualify you for a certain period of time. So if we know that we don't have a long-term care insurance policy, and there's the possibility that we might have to, and we don't normally know that we're going to have to go to a nursing facility, but if we're going to be looking for Medicaid to pay it, we need to be making plans to either get that asset out of our name and know that we're not going to be able to apply for Medicaid for at least 5 years from the time. Now, there are some things that you can do. You can buy burial property. You can do certain types of trusts, but it would require you getting in touch with someone that does Medicaid to be able to know that those things that you can do. But in making preparations to potentially go into a nursing home, you need to make those preparations in due time, and that due time is at least 60 months. The problem that I have seen is that unfortunately, some folks sometimes are uncomfortable with deeding their houses away to their children because they're afraid that their children are going to put them out of the house and they want a place to stay. And so they want to hold on to those assets. And because they hold on to those assets, what Medicaid says is that you're going to essentially have to use that asset to pay for your nursing home. So in other words, you're going to have to spend that money that you have in the bank for your nursing home care before we will pay. You're going to have to sell that asset or at least put someone in that asset and get fair market value in rent for that asset and use that rental money to pay for your nursing home care, and we're not going to pay for it. So those are things that we have to look at. Now, also, I was saying that there are other documents that we need to get. There is what we call a living will, and there is a healthcare power of attorney. These documents do somewhat of the same thing. What a living will essentially does is it states in the living will what you would have done if you get into a healthcare situation. For example, in a living will, you can designate what we call advance directives, such as if you don't want to be resuscitated, if you don't want certain things to be done to you, when it gets to that point where it is determined that you're at the latter stages of your life and you don't want life, how we call it, life-saving measures to be done. You don't want, if your heart stops, you don't want to be resuscitated. And a living will directs the healthcare doctors to do what you want. Now, there's also what we call a healthcare power of attorney. I prefer the healthcare power of attorney because the healthcare power of attorney allows you to designate an agent. For example, you can designate your spouse. You can designate one of your children. You can designate someone that you trust. And the reason I prefer that is that oftentimes what will happen in a hospital will make decisions based on whether or not a person has the ability to pay or not pay. Because we often know that if a person has the ability to pay, a hospital would go above and beyond to give that person the best care. However, if they know that they have someone in that hospital who has no ability to pay, they don't have any insurance, or their insurance has paid all that the insurance will pay, a hospital will make a decision based on that. However, if you have a healthcare agent that you trust, and that healthcare agent, and I know Reverend Simmons knows what I'm talking about because she and I had conversations where she says, I want them to do this or that for my parents, and I understand that. And oftentimes we have had conversations with our parents, and we know exactly what our parents would want. We know because we've had those conversations. And so if you're the healthcare agent, then you can dictate how much or how little that the hospital does for your loved one. However, if there is no healthcare power of attorney, then unfortunately in those situations, they do begin to look to a number of family members. And unfortunately, we all know that sometimes it's hard to get a number of folks to agree upon what needs to be done. And then unfortunately, in those situations, the hospital is the last say. And we also need will. Many of us think, well, I don't have a whole lot, so I don't need a will. And then the other question I get is that if I don't have a will, does my property go to the state? Now, the reason that you should have a will, even if that will is never probated, at least there is something that says to your family what you want done, who I want to get certain things. Now, let me caution folk, because in every will I've ever done, we always put in there the type of burial the person wants. I want my body to have a proper burial, but also understand that will tends to be probated a long time after that person has been buried. but it's still always good to have a will, because a will says to your family what you want to be done with your property once you have passed away. Uh, if you don't have a will, which what we call is that if a person dies with a will, we say they died testate. If they die without a will, we say they die intestate. And so if they die intestate, then what happens when we go to probate? Then we have to, I guess, that property is given away based on the statute. Uh, it takes into account if there's a spouse, it takes into account how many children. Uh, and so the statute dictates. And I think a person should be able to dictate how they want their property to go. We all know that sometimes we have given to one of our children so much more in life, the child that we didn't have to give so much to, we might want to give them a little bit more in death. And so, however, if we don't have a will, that's not going to occur. So even if you don't have a whole lot of property, it's always good to have a will, because it allows you to dictate how you want your property to go. Now, let me stop right there for just a moment and let's see if there are any questions.
Pa- Pastor, I have a question. Um,
Sure.
Being a power attorney, this is what I ran into with my parents. I was on their bank account as power of attorney, but I did not know until too late that being on their bank account as a power of attorney is not good enough, because once they passed away, then my power died. In other words, when they died, my power died. I had to be on as a survivor or a joint on their accounts, because once they both passed away, uh, that account was locked.
Correct. And that was why I said oftentimes we don't necessarily always run into good bankers, because I remember when I opened my first account, my banker never said anything to me about that. However, I got a little bit older and practiced law a little bit longer. I knew that there were certain types of accounts, because I had represented folk who um, had to go into probate. And so in doing so, I began to learn that in your bank accounts, you can have it set up where that account does not have to wait until probate, that that survivor who is named as a survivor can then go directly into the bank and get the money from the bank. And that's very important because, as I said, oftentimes we have folks who have little estates. And when I say small estates are estates where there is no house, there is no substantial money. There may be only a few things in their rental house, but also understand that if it's two spouses, you don't have to go through probate for the house to transfer. If their spouses, the house is in tenancy by the entireties, that house is going to automatically transfer to the living spouse. And so for many folk, that is the largest asset that they have. And then they have some money in the bank. And oftentimes folks need immediate access to that money to take care of final needs, take care of some bills. And so if you have to wait to probate, then that puts those folks in a less than advantageous position. So it's always good to ask the banker about having a survivor on that account. So it's not necessary to go through probate, because yes, when a person passes, your power of attorney for that person also, it ends at that period.
Okay, you talked about wills, so um, in a will, a person can, I guess, state who they want to be the executor or the executress of their estate, correct? I mean, to handle their affairs once they're no longer here. I mean, or take care
That
of.
is correct.
Okay.
If they don't have a will and they have to go through probate, then somebody has to, will then go in and request letters of administration. Someone has to qualify. But what you can do and oftentimes, unless all of the heirs agree, then that person has to also get a bond. Now, when doing a will, you can do a will and say, I designate my wife, or I designate my son, or I designate such and such to be the executor or the executrix of my estate. And I allow them to operate without bond, meaning I don't want money to be given to such and such bond company on my small estate as it is, because I trust the person that I'm putting in. Now, all of this is about trust. Now, the other thing that I failed to mention is that sometimes we have parents who become incapacitated,
Mhm.
and incapacitated in the sense that they're not able to make decisions, because
Mhm.
say we know Alzheimer's is prevalent within our communities. And for example, my father got Alzheimer's. But if you've got a power of attorney, you can continue to operate under that power of attorney. But if you don't have a power of attorney, then you now have to go to the clerk of court and ask for a guardianship over that person. So you can then begin to handle that a person's estate. You can begin to make decisions for that person, to find a nursing home for that person, to find a doctor for that person, to find all the necessary things that that person needs to continue living. Because although they're incapacitated, that doesn't mean that they're not still living, and that they not still have business that needs to be taken care of.
Right. Uh, Pastor, maybe you can answer this question for me. Like, as far as like these things like power of attorney, healthcare power of attorney, wills, documents like those, about what time or when should we put those things in place? Because like next month I'll be 60. So, the Lord promised us three score and ten, which is 70 and 80 with strength. So I'm about to be 60. So I got about 10, 20 more years, maybe, somewhere there, maybe a little bit more, unless I live to be as old as Aunt Ada Bell. Uh,
Now, this is my recommendation, that you get a power of attorney, you get a healthcare power of attorney, you get a will as soon as possible. None of us know, how long we're going to be here. And
right,
as I mentioned earlier, you get a power of attorney because you can just be incapacitated for a month. And if you don't have anybody who's able to handle your affairs for that month, you can get yourself, you know, in a pickle, because nobody can do anything for you. Nobody can go to the bank for you. Nobody can do, certain things for you. Now, of course, I understand that you can take stuff to somebody and get them to write a check. But for example, I'm gonna give you an example right now. And person has diabetes, and we know that there are people who unfortunately, in the society that we live, people are getting diabetes much earlier. And if your sugar gets out of whack, one of the things that happens is that you tend to lose your ability to know what's going on. And that can happen for a week. And you all know, who live down in Rutherford County, oftentimes you go to Rutherford Hospital, they'll send you to another hospital to see what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Course of that week, you may need somebody to handle something for you.
Oh, God.
The power of attorney, that person can handle it for you. If, you know, for example, if it's your wife or it's your husband and you're incapacitated, that person can handle whatever needs to be handled. So I would recommend that you do that as early as possible. Now, a will is just like, in my opinion, just like as we're talking about insurance. A will is something that you update. If I do a will at 25, I might want to look at that will again at age 30. And again, I might want to look at it again in about 5 more years. Now, of course, people don't do that. We tend to wait until, you know, we begin to think about death before we do those things. But it's always good to do those things. And here again, when I talk about healthcare power of attorney, we don't want the unfortunate to happen, and we don't want the unexpected to happen. But for example, we're living in this age of COVID.
Yes.
And none of the folk who are in the hospitals on respirators expected to be in hospitals on respirators. And if you're in the hospital on a respirator, somebody needs to make sure that your apartment or your house is still, you know, being maintained. Somebody needs to make sure that your car payments, hopefully there's some money there to pay the car payment, because if you come out of the hospital, say 5 months later, and nothing taken care of, you no longer have a house to stay in. You no longer have a car to drive. You have a number of things because no one had the ability to handle those things on your behalf. But, you know, 5 months before then, you weren't expecting what happened to happen.
Exactly.
And
So
so,
true.
you know, even before COVID, folks were getting into car accidents. And so these are some of the reasons why the earlier we do those documents, the better. And as I say, we can always update them. But we don't think about those things.
Exactly.
Pastor Young, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Free legal advice here, right?
Sure.
Going back to your scenario with Medicaid, if you own property, if you own a house, and as you move through life and you opt to, or you choose to, or you would like to move property out of your name in the hope of getting Medicaid to pay for that long-term care that you discussed. Can that property be put in a trust fund rather than in the name of children or other relatives? And does that?
It can be put in a trust, but here again, the 5-year look back. Now, there are certain types of trusts. The question becomes whether or not you have the ability to get into that trust. As we said, is it a revocable or irrevocable trust? Now, if it's the type of trust that I can revoke and then get access to the money, then it's going to be used against you for Medicaid purposes.
So if I have a revocable trust,
Wow.
and I am the trustee, Medicaid is going to look at that as if I've never done anything.
Correct.
So, Pastor, what do we do?
Well, basically what Medicaid is saying is that if you've got the ability to pay for your care, then you've got to help pay for your care. Medicaid says that we're not going to allow you to pay, we're not going to allow you to hold on to assets and also pay for your care. So in other words, Medicaid is saying if you're willing to get rid of that stuff where you no longer have the ability to have access to it, and you do it for over a period where you've no longer had it for at least 5 years, then we will allow you to get Medicaid.
Okay, Pastor. So I'm getting ready to be 60 next month. So I need to go ahead and me and Randy need to go ahead and deed the house to the kids as a life estate. What about if we deed it to the kids as a life estate?
Now, understand, you're saying if you deed it to the kids and you hold on to a life estate?
Well, a life estate, I thought you give it away, but that you can only live there till you die.
Well, what you're saying is that you're giving it to them and you're holding on to a life estate. What under that scenario, Medicaid is still saying that you have an asset.
Dog. Okay.
Because look at this scenario. Now let me also say this: if both you and Randy are still alive, and say one of you has to go to the nursing home, as long as the other lives in the house, Medicaid does not count that against you. However, let's say both of you have to go to the nursing home and you have a life estate, you still have an asset. And the reason you still have an asset, because over the course of your life, you can get fair market rent for that house.
All right, Pastor Young.
Mm-hmm.
So here's a hypothetical. So we sell the house. We park the money. We give the money away to the children, or anybody. They give the money away to the children. Equal share to all the children and or grandchildren, whatever the Internal Revenue Service says that we give away, we give it away, and we give it away over the course of, say, 4 to 5 years. $12,000, $13,000 here, $12,000, $13,000 there. We give it away. But we get to the 4th year, and a spouse and both spouses need to go into a nursing home. Are they going to claw back all of that money, or are they going to only claw back 20% of that money if we've given the money away over the course of 4 years?
Okay, so what happens is, let's use this date. Let's use 2021, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you're saying you're gonna need to go into the nursing home in 2025.
Well, we don't plan that, but
I know you don't plan it. See, the look back period, whatever is within that 60-month look back period, they're gonna grab hold to everything that's a 60-month look back period.
Wow.
Okay, so a couple is trying to give the money away. They've sold the house, they got a motorhome, they're traveling the world, but the money's sitting over here and we're trying to give it away. Okay, but we're only through the 4th year, and just to make it easy, there's 100,000, we've given away 80, there's 20 left. They're going to take that 20, or they're going to go back and take off the whole 100?
They're gonna take the whole 100.
Man.
When I say the look back period, whatever you had during any of that 60 months. So essentially what has to happen is, let's say you sell the house today. Today is January the 14th. You need to give it away on January the 15th and not apply for Medicaid until January the 16th of 2026.
Well, at $6,000 a month that you talked about with the nursing care, I'm going to be broke either way, ain't I?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, you done worked all your life and you have nothing.
You broke, Dale.
Well, to me, it sounds like If I get me a live-in healthcare provider, I'm gonna give them room and board and pay them a salary. I come out better, right?
But here again, the question usually becomes, what is necessary? Now, sometimes what the doctors will order is skilled nursing.
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna get.
Okay,
Yeah.
oftentimes you can't, there is what we have, we have, I guess, 3 levels. We have what's called skill, we have assisted, and then we have aid. Now, there are times where you cannot, the doctor's saying you need skilled care, which means that you need to go to a place where that provides skilled. Other times that they will say that you're not necessarily that bad off, you can do with assisted. And then the other thing is that when they say that your situation is not that bad, where you can have, say, a company that will send a CNA to your home on a regular basis, like twice a day, every day in the week. Of course, the lower level of care doesn't require, because you're still living in your home, it does not require that your home be counted in getting some aid from Medicaid. However, if you actually having to leave your home, then that's when they begin to look at that asset.
Mm.
And essentially, what they are saying is that we should not be paying for stuff that, when you have the financial means to pay yourself. And,
So they're gonna take everything I had.
and so the
And
only
I was healthy.
way to avoid that, see, they keep making the period a little bit longer and a little bit longer. The period, I think when
Used
I
to be
first
3
started
years.
practicing law, the period was maybe 2 years. And then it went to 3 years.
3 years, and now it's 5.
Now it's 5
It's
years.
5 years. Yep.
To the young lady, I think that's Linda.
Yes.
Linda, I have a person that works for me who made the effort to keep their mother at home.
Mm.
She required 24 hours care. She paid the people minimum wage, I think. But basically in 3 years, she spent $250,000.
Wow.
So, which is about the same amount of money that Pastor Young is saying a private room in a care facility is going to cost. So she spent the same amount of money trying to keep her mom at home. So I don't know that that's the answer either.
Now, the best answer, but you always have to check with folk who deal with that, is usually getting in your home paying market rent. If market rent in that home is, say, $1,000 a month, then that's what Medicaid is saying, is that, if I remember correctly, but don't quote me on this one. But if I remember correctly, Medicaid will allow you to put someone in the home at market rent, that you've got to pay that plus they also look at, for example, many of the folks who are getting Medicaid also get Social Security. One of the things that Medicaid will do is that they will take all of your Social Security or your pension,
Yep.
will allow you to keep $28.
They said $30 for mama. They sure did.
Well, they've gone up a couple
They
dollars,
said
and then they will
$30.
pay the other amount. So if I remember correctly, let's say you're getting a pension, all of your pension plus all of your pension except for that amount that they will allow you to keep, or incidentals like you can buy soap,
Bar soap.
toothpaste, things of that nature. But I think they will also allow you to rent your house out, but it's got to be market rent. You can't, you can't put your child in there, market rent be 1,500, and you allow your child to pay 500. It's got to be market rent. And as I said, don't quote me on that because they changed the things about Medicaid. They change the regulations so often. Is that what might be what you might be able to do this year, you might not be able to do next year.
Exactly.
And I've not checked on that, but there was a time where you could actually rent your house out for market rent. And then that amount would have to go towards your care as well.
Along with my Social Security and my pension.
Yeah.
They're gonna take everything.
Also
That's a very
understand
expensive
Also
hotel.
understand that there is that income level. If your Social Security and your pension exceed income level, you're not going to qualify either.
All right, Pastor Young, you need to repeat that.
Wow.
That's it. If you say your Social Security, whatever your income is, if your Social Security, let's say your income is Social Security and pension. If your Social Security and pension exceed the income level, you're not going to qualify. About
What
2
is the
years
income?
ago,
What
income
is the
level
income
was,
level?
well, the income level, again, as I said last year, it was about $2,400.
So if somebody's Social Security and their pension exceeds $2,500, there's no way they're going to qualify for the Medicaid anyway.
Right.
Right.
Okay, I can forget it.
Yep, you broke, Dale.
Hey, look, I'm broke and homeless.
Yeah, you're going to be
So,
homeless.
so that means, even though that I'm not gonna qualify for it, if I have to go to a nursing care, they're gonna take all my pension, they're gonna take all my Social Security, and then they're gonna take all the rent that I'm getting off my house, right?
Well, let me say this. You're not getting any, you're not going to get any Medicaid. If
I know.
you just,
We ain't getting nothing. Oh,
you're basically going to have to, use that to pay for the nursing home care out of pocket.
No, I'm gonna get me a nurse to come up in here and stay, and then I'm gonna get him room and board.
wow.
And
Well,
here again, we're talking about folks of what I call middle income. And it goes back to what Mr. Petty was talking about earlier. We need to be making preparations such as, putting money aside, knowing that, let's say, I'm a teacher. So I know that probably with my pension and my Social Security, I won't qualify for any Medicaid. And if I have to go into a nursing home, I'm either going to have to pay for it out of pocket, or I need to have a long-term,
Insurance.
policy in place when I get to that stage in my life.
Okay, I need to talk to Robert about some insurance.
What did
The
the longevity
unfortunate
he's gonna cost
reality,
me about $500 a month.
the unfortunate reality is that when we get our age, we can't.
it's expensive.
So
It's expensive.
what is the person supposed to do?
I'm gonna get me somebody come in here and stay, and then tomorrow I'm gonna adopt me some children. Oh, they're gonna take care of me, or I'm coming to your house.
Wow.
Well, Pastor Young, you've convinced me. We all just need to quit now.
Man, there's no way around it. What we do? Lord, help us.
That's
Okay,
great information. Great information.
Yes, it is.
this
Mhm.
has been a wonderful workshop. It went a little longer than I thought, but Pastor, you have opened my eyes to. I had no idea. I mean, I thought, well, yeah, you could do this and you could do that. No, you can't. I mean, it's like they got all this stuff up, and it's like they win no matter what.
Well, and let me say this. As if you got a decent pension and you've got decent Social Security, you can probably find a nursing home that will accept that and say that they're going to now understand that they're going to keep on the books a debt that once you pass, that they're going to be looking to see if your estate has anything to try and get additional money that they can get. They most nursing homes understand that if a person
Yes,
is not eligible for Medicaid, they must have a decent amount of money. Now, this is the rub, is that if they're going to take you into the nursing home and private pay, they're going to want you to designate or assign those benefits to come directly to them.
Mm,
Now, this is another thing that I always tell folks. For example, even if your person qualifies for Medicaid and they're still getting a pension, the nursing home will want you to sign this document where the Social Security will come directly to them. You never
hmm
do that. You want to write them a check each month. And the reason you want to write them a check each month is that it makes them be more accountable to you because they know as long as you're writing the check, you can decide, as opposed to writing the check on the first each month, you might hold back and not write the check until the 11th or the 12th. Anything that you can do to hold the nursing home accountable. When I say hold them accountable, to make sure that they're checking in on your loved one. Now, of course, you need to go to that nursing home on a regular basis. You need to go to that nursing home and show up at different times. They don't know when you're going to show up, but they know that you're a person that's always going to show up. So you know that they're not going to leave your loved one in there unattended to. And so anything that you can do to hold them accountable, you need to do that.
Okay.
But the reality, as I said, I'm sure it's, you know, none of us expect that we will ever have to go to a nursing home, but that's one of the things that, you know, we need to prepare for. And it's like anything in insurance. It's just like, as we were talking earlier, many of us buy insurance. So when our time comes that our loved ones, don't have to go and put up GoFundMe pages, you know, that they can go ahead and make sure that your burial, you make sure that your burial is taken care of. I've got policies where when I pass, my family doesn't have to worry about, taking care of that.
hmm So, Pastor, basically, the Bible does speak of leaving an inheritance. The way you presented the stuff with Medicaid, we're not going to be able to qualify. They're going to take all of our money. How are we going to leave our kids or our grandkids anything?
Well, what we're hoping is that we take care of ourselves, that we may not have to end up in a nursing home. We hope, if God
So maybe, but see, if I just, if God just take me and I just die in my sleep or I have a heart attack, then I don't have to go to the nursing home and then the will or whatever take care of it. But if I just get sick or if I get dementia or something like that and the kids can't take care of me and I got to go to the nursing home, I can't leave them in inheritance because they took everything.
Well, actually, Dale, I'm not pushing life insurance here, but hypothetically, if you have a life insurance policy, they can access the cash value and or dividends in a life policy, but still at your death or demise, that inheritance could still go to the designated beneficiary, could be your children or grandchildren. So then you still meet that what I call suggestion in the Bible of leaving an inheritance for your children's children.
Yeah, but I wanted to pass on to them what was left to me.
Well, in essence, you're doing that because basically, what Pastor Young is talking about is money. What Mr. Miller's talking about is money. What I'm talking about is money. And it's just a matter of what you're buying with your money. You're buying life insurance, you're buying services. But at the end of the day, this is all about buying money. It's all about buying money. And where you place that money is maybe where the education needs to be in our community. But at the end of the day, we're all buying money.
Now,
Whether it's car insurance or homeowners insurance or life insurance, we're buying money with money. You're buying money with money.
let me say this, and I'm reminded of two scriptures. One says, raise a child in the way that they should go, right?
Yes.
The other scripture says, when it talks about children, honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days might be long on this earth. Now, there are always, and let me say this, there are always ways around things like Medicaid. And when I say asset protections, there are ways for us to do it, but it always is based on trust. And
Okay.
and the problem for many of us is a lack of trust.
Okay.
For a lot of us, the reason that we don't want to deed our property to our children earlier because we don't trust them. Now, my thing is that the Bible teaches us that if we raise the child in the proper way, then that trust should be there because God promises everything it comes with a promise. If you train up a child in the way that they will go, what is the promise to that?
You won't depart.
So
And he gonna take care of you when you get old.
if that's the case, then you can trust your child that I'm gonna go ahead and deed this house to you. But Randy and I are going to still stay here. Now, unfortunately, I have seen parents who did not raise their children properly, but they still love their children. And in loving their children, they went ahead and they deeded their property to their children, and their children ushered them out of their home.
Wow. That's sad.
Now, if you trust your child because you have raised your child right, you've raised your child godly, then you can trust your child that although I'm deeding this house to you, we're still going to live here. And if something occurs and we have to go to the nursing home, it is out of our names and it's in your name. And then we can possibly qualify for some assistance as we have to go into the nursing home. If not, if we don't qualify for any assistance, then they'll just take the pension, the Social Security that I have coming in. Either way, you're only gonna get your $30. It doesn't matter whether you qualify or not. you know, you're just gonna have a little bit of money there anyway. But at least under that scenario, your kids do have the house that you have bought and paid for over the years that you have worked hard, and it's not lost.
You know what? I think the smart thing to do is when you're very young and you're very broke, take out a huge insurance policy and just keep paying on it.
But as Mr. Miller said, is that unfortunately you're very broke, and
You're very broke. That's right. Gerber, grow up. That's the answer, right, Robert Petty? No, I'm just kidding.
You better not mention Gerber again on this call.
I'm just playing. Okay.
That's very, very good information. Very good information.
This has been a
Very
wonderful
good.
workshop, but I know some of you have to go to work like my just like me in the morning. So we need to end this call. I'd like to first of all thank each and every one of you from the bottom of my heart for coming on, for sharing, um for your input and for your your questions, because it was just on my heart to do this, and I just wanted my pastor, my friend Robert Petty, and my friend Mr. Miller to come on and share with us, because when my parents both passed away, and they put me in a position of being the executors of the estate, and I had to figure out all this stuff. It was so much that I didn't know, and had I known some things, I would have done some things differently, or encouraged my mother and my father to do some things differently. But you live and learn. And my thought is to share information. So what I learned, maybe I can share through these experts, Reverend Young and Mr. Robert Petty and Mr. Ulysses Miller, through these experts, that we can gain knowledge and help one another, so we can pass that information on to someone else that may not know. Or even if we can't explain to them exactly how it was explained to us, we can direct them to someone of these type experts that can help guide them, so that they won't have to go through some of the hardships that I went through.
Maybe you should do this every 6 months.
Really? Hmm.
Just a suggestion. I learned a lot from the pastor tonight, uh, both from the pastor side and from the attorney side. And yeah, we do need to go out and share that information. Mr. Miller and I are good friends. I also learned a lot from him tonight. So, but I don't think you can share too much, because there's so much misinformation out there, Dale, and for the other attendants on the call, there's so much misinformation out there, and Pastor Young alluded to it.
Hmm.
I'm not saying I'm a good insurance agent, but there are a lot of bad people out there,
Yes.
and so yes, it does need to be shared, and it needs to be shared in our community even more,
Yes.
because we tend not to, or our forefathers tend not to have shared these types of information with us. It's not because they wanted to hide it. It's simply they didn't know.
Exactly.
And so it does need to be shared on a regular basis.
Exactly. Well, just a little bit of insight, and Lord willing, if we see this come to fruition, but I plan on working with Mrs. Young on my next virtual workshop, and it's about canning and food preparation. Like growing your own garden and putting away your own foods and stuff. So, if the Lord willing and Mrs. Young and I are able to get together, we're gonna see her doing some canning and some of that type stuff that I should have learned from my mom, but I was doing whatever and I didn't learn that skill. So now here I am at 60 trying to gain the knowledge. But I'd just like to say thank each and every one of you for coming, participating, and this was a wonderful workshop. Thank you, Mr. Robert Petty. Thank you, Mr. Ulysses Miller, and thank you, my pastor, my friend, my colleague, Reverend Terry P. Young. And thank each and every family represented on the Zoom line. It's been a wonderful event, and I thank y'all for coming on.
Reverend Simmons, before you go,
Yes, sir.
yes, please say hello to your husband for me and tell him that I'll certainly be praying for him.
I will. I will. Pastor, if you would, will you close out this workshop with prayer for us, please?
Sure.
Mr. Petty, did you have any final comments?
Hey, thanks for letting me join in. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Let us pray. Gracious Heavenly Father, thank you for allowing us just to come together for this time of sharing. And we pray, Lord, that these things that have been shared with one another might get out to the general public, that it might be helpful in someone's life. Now, Lord, we ask that you would bless each of us and that you would bless our communities. It's in Jesus' name we pray, and let everyone say amen.
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 Man.
Thank y'all. Y'all have a good night.